Okay, this is the meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee for Tuesday, March 21st, 2017. I call it to order. Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. David?
Present.
Mr. Jessic? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. LaSalle?
Here.
Mr. McEnroe?
Here.
Mr. Lyman? And Mr. Mahoney.
As soon as our new member gets here, well, we'll fit him into the agenda.
That makes sense.
Yeah. The first item is approval of the minutes of February 21st, 2017. Does anybody have any additions or changes to those minutes they'd like to put in? Okay, everybody, and let's see, do we have?
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes from the 21st.
And I'll second it.
Okay, everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I abstained, I
Opposed?
wasn't here.
Okay, minutes of February 21st, 2017 special meeting.
I read those, and I do say that they are as accurate, and I move that we adopt them.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, both meetings have been approved. Agenda analysis, does anybody have any changes they want to make to the agenda or additions? Okay. Citizen comments. I don't have any cards, but would anybody out there, would you like to make comments?
No,
Okay,
I'm just here to observe.
okay. Glad to have you here.
For those of you that don't remember, Mary was the chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee for several years, and she, I think, sounds like she's applied for a position that maybe we don't quite have, but that's probably because of our website being a little out of date. But we she served for a long time.
Oh,
And,
okay. Great.
and would be a great addition.
Okay, our next item, we'll skip the introduction of Edward Lyman and go on to 2017 TAC goals.
So you want to pull up that? You want to drop the screen, Lisa? And so in the past, in 2000, we were looking back a little bit. Actually, Lisa was looking back and reminding me of how we did goals. So in 2015, we did a pretty good job with setting our goals. We actually scheduled some time with. I remember it was at least you, Bob. I don't know if the co-chair was in that meeting with us at all, but we talked a fair amount about what the Transportation Advisory Committee might want to take on for that year. And we didn't do that in 2016, so we never really established goals, but Lisa went through the minutes and kind of created goals, and that's what we reported on when we did the 2016 annual report. So she's pulled those together. I'm not sure that it would. I'm not sure how productive it would be to spend much time tonight trying to have people think about goals, because they haven't really had an opportunity to do that. But to me, what made sense is to share this information. She's already shared the City Commission's goals also in your packet. So those goals are in there. And then I guess it's up to you, Bob, but I would suggest that maybe we schedule some one-on-one time with you and the vice chair to kind of, and maybe have the rest of the membership chime in. There's opportunity for that tonight, but I was thinking it's maybe an item that people haven't thought much about, and so maybe it makes sense to schedule something in a couple of weeks on an off week for TAC, and when we could collaborate on what we really want to focus on. So kind of a more in-depth subcommittee meeting.
So you're suggesting a special meeting to address these goals?
What I'm suggesting is a subcommittee meeting, if you will, between you and the vice chair and anybody else that really wants to participate. It's not excluding anybody. I'm just
Yeah.
saying more of a work session kind of a thing that could happen in one of our regular meeting rooms. Wouldn't be recorded. It would be just time to talk and figure out what we want to recommend to the committee at large. But that's just my idea, and you're the chair. Maybe you've got something else.
Well, that's exactly opposed to whatever I would ever do, but it sounds like a pretty good idea. Yeah, why don't you let us all know when a meeting room is available, and then as many people as possible I would like to see come to that meeting, because I agree, we haven't had this subject before us for long enough to really have any good input.
So we'll send this out, and along with the city commission goals, just so you'll have those at your. I think you already have them in your packets, but we'll send them out again
Yeah.
and suggest some times.
When you send them out, would you put just a little sentence there saying whether they'd been addressed or not?
Sure,
Can you have a meeting?
we can
of-
highlight them.
Yeah.
Can you have a meeting of the TAC without it being a posted meeting?
Yeah, I suppose there's some limitations on how many we can have without it being a quorum, but I'd have to look at the bylaws to
Oh,
kind of confirm that. Before it was just
Yeah,
a small
before-
subcommittee of just the two of us, and then we get input from folks on the committee via email as to what they'd like to see on the goals.
yeah.
Yeah, I,
I
believe
think
once you start
having
getting a
the
certain
status
percentage of the
report of
membership.
those.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I think having the status report would be very helpful, like completed, in progress with a date, or not started, or something like that. So, and is there more than just the 216 TAC goals that are listed right there? Is there another? That's it. Okay.
Yeah. Most of these are, the way they were written is priority topics for discussion and analysis. So most everything we've brought before the committee. So they weren't necessarily goals that resulted in a
Action
deliverable or an accomplishment. They were a little bit more like make sure we stay in touch with the Willamette Falls Legacy Project or the hospital project. And so there's quite a bit of that up there. I would like to see us, like for instance, I thought the citywide safety campaign was the Drive Safe Oregon City was successful, but it seemed like on the actual implementation end of things, we may want to regroup and figure out what we might want to do with that program to make sure it's successful in the future. But
Well, while we're on that subject, though, I'd like to remind it that we had considered using Boy Scouts for the garbage can stickers, and because it hasn't been successful with leaving it up to the neighborhood associations. Of course, the Boy Scouts have school during the school year, but we're obviously going to have a lot of those stickers still available. I'd like to encourage any members that have affiliations with any Boy Scout groups that we maybe approach them as a summer project. I know, John, you're involved with the Boy Scouts deeply. Maybe you could help us with that.
Possibly, yes.
Okay.
the little problem we have is I've got some of those stickers back from neighborhoods that have just turned them back over upon request,
Yeah.
and that haven't had the capacity to do anything with them. But there's other neighborhoods who haven't done that, so I'm not sure if they're sitting on their, in their spare bedroom or if some of them went out. I know some of them did go out, so somehow, there's also that to figure out how many stickers we have to actually apply.
Well, I could call every one of the neighborhood chairs.
And I also have a contact with the Scoutmaster, so I could talk to him. And
Okay.
approximately how many stickers do you have still?
That's what we don't know, Jonathan.
Yeah, it'd be several hundred.
Okay.
Sure.
But anyway, that's to me a goal that we could probably renew and bring forward. That's a little bit more action driven. I mean, I think we've delivered on these. We just, it was more the placement that kind of
Yeah.
fell apart on that one.
Come up with some new ideas for that program.
Okay, so we'll bring these back with kind of an update on what's been completed. But again, I think a lot of them are still active projects. You're probably still interested in hearing about the Willamette Falls Legacy project as we proceed. So it'll probably stay on the goals. But that's it for that item, unless you have something else you want to.
There's one comment that I'd like to bring up, that you've included the city commission goals. I don't see any of their goals relating to transportation. Is that because they think everything is just fine in Oregon City, or?
Well, that's one challenge that I have with the city commission goals is there's all those things that are kind of expectations that don't necessarily show up as a special goal for the city commission. So management of transportation, inclusion of transportation analysis and development approval, working with the transit authority to make sure we've got good transit, unless it's a big goal like maybe moving the Amtrak station or bringing high-speed rail to to Oregon City, or something like that. Yeah, they keep their goals pretty focused on things that are not all things that are important, but those things that they're wanting to make progress with.
Well, I'd like to see the Transportation Committee be more focused on the items in our bylaws that state we're supposed to be advising the City Commission and the Planning Commission. And it doesn't seem like we're getting many opportunities to work far enough in advance to give them our advice or opinions about matters. Now, of course, living in Park Place, I know what's going on there quite intimately with development, which in turn includes transportation. And one person brought up a couple of ideas to me that we could bring to the Planning Commission when that area gets close to being developed. But if we don't work on it now or in the near future to come up with some solutions to the traffic problems that will arise, we won't have any solutions or recommendations to the Planning Commission when it happens. And I believe in a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach to future problems that can be foreseen now. For example, in that area, one of the conditions of approval we could bring up and recommend to the Planning Commission is that the developer be responsible for sidewalks, reconnection of sidewalks, maybe beyond their geographic limits. But, if there's, say, 100 feet of sidewalk that would complete a sidewalk addition or connection, make it a condition of approval. I know my own personal life, coming out of Oak Tree Terrace onto Holcomb Boulevard, is a somewhat risky situation. And I know that Martin has gone up there and remeasured the sight distance, and according to probably the engineers, which I greatly respect, the sight distance is just fine. But the engineers fail to realize that people are coming down Holcomb Boulevard lickety-split, not necessarily the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. And when you come out of my street, you got to really gun it sometimes because people come over that hump. So with those additional 124 homes, I would like a condition of approval to be to lower Holcomb Boulevard again. But this would take some study, and those are two examples of what I would like to see this Transportation Advisory Committee be involved in, is proactive early on actions like this so that we can complete one of our bylaws of advising the Planning Commission and the City Commission.
Well, I guess that could become also one of the goals, I guess, of the TAC for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause I feel this committee can get a lot done and give a lot of good advice. And I'd like to see that followed up on.
I agree with Bob on that. The challenge administratively is to get that.
Hey, Bob, we might want you
Oh,
to get a
okay.
microphone.
The challenge to implement that is what form does that take to incorporate that as a policy of the city, an established policy of the city, so that it can it just doesn't die because it was considered as a comment. If it's written somewhere that the planning commission can incorporate that as part of its findings as a recommendation from the from TAC, then it's got some muscle. And how you go about doing that internally through the mechanism of the city, that's the challenge, so that the city commission recognizes it and accepts it and expects it to come before them in a matter of maybe a zone change or an approval of a conditional use or something like that, that's incorporated into those findings and somewhere down the line is implemented. And that takes a little bit of an administrative challenge by the staff to get that before the commission.
Of course, we could always figure out how to get the commission to direct that to happen.
Say again?
One could always figure out how to get the commission to direct that to happen. Then it becomes written and it becomes part of the procedure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, how to get that to not trickle down but trickle up. So
Since they have milestones here for the city priorities and milestones, it would be nice if there was some aspect of a transportation component, like how X amount of feet of sidewalk built annually, or X amount of bicycle lanes, so that it's documented, and there's that expectation that annually we will be putting that X amount, or we've exceeded or we didn't meet the milestones that we've set for ourselves.
where that takes place is in the budget.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want planning to actually have a life, you got to incorporate that into the budget. That's when the rubber hits the road, I'll tell you that. You get everybody's attention, and they're either going to do it or they're not going to do it. So if we can get that into the budget,
But there's also grants available that we can be
Yeah.
applying for. So maybe there was a line item in the budget that could be a match for these items of bike ped, that we could go after additional monies and leverage the money in a more efficient manner.
Well, I think if you can get these neighborhood associations on your side, and they expect this to happen with the backing of TAC and the planning commission, so that it gets incorporated into the budget, and the budget's in the throes right now of being prepared. So now's the time to act if we're going to do that, and I think we ought to do it through the chairman.
Would this be a good time to mention that we still have the option of doing a city gas tax?
It's up to the commission, I guess, committee.
But some of the issues that you guys mentioned, the bike lanes and sidewalks, I mean, that does find its way into the budget through the CIP program that city has. So if it's identified and prioritized in that program, then it finds a way into a budget. So the city already kind of has some of those things already kind of in a pipeline.
The only thing we don't have in the pipeline is money.
Yeah.
Well, they have annual budget.
We do have money. We do have some money, and we're budgeting. We've got a pretty long list of capital projects in the budget, and maybe that's a goal, is to share with the Transportation Advisory Committee the details of the capital plan that's in the budget, because there may be those are specific line items. Myrna and I put those together that are based on the transportation system plan, what we know in terms of development, or what we know in terms of community projects, what we know in terms of projects that are kind of relatively easy to complete without a lot of right-of-way acquisition, those kind of things.
And we have that, the CIP, so it'd be nice to bring up those milestones in this document to mirror that and to reflect it so that when city council comes or commission gets together, they can say, oh, we've achieved this in our transportation side. It just makes it a little more transparent and more obvious in bringing to the forefront of their minds the importance of transportation, because this is very facility heavy.
But are those are goals or projects that the department is implementing? They're not goals for TAC. So I don't.
This is city commission goals, priorities, and milestones.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be nice if there was a transportation component in there saying our goal is to build X amount of linear feet of sidewalk annually. Or bicycle lanes or something like that.
And we just haven't seen that level of detail and that kind of interest from the commission on those kind of items. What they do pursue is a balanced budget, and they approve that budget, and that's where they see those line items.
Okay.
And maybe making it enhance the livability of the community might mean sidewalks, but to them it's more there's some sub items under
I'm
there.
always going to push bike ped, so
yeah and things like development standards, adoption of the transportation system plan, those are kind of the things right now since we have an adopted transportation system plan in there. It's the adoption of the stormwater master plan. So it's not paths, but it's something that's important to the Natural Resource Advisory Group. So I would say the commission goals are at a kind of a higher level than at least they have been from my experience. But for this committee, figuring out what this committee wants to do, not necessarily what they think the commission should do, or how they can inform the commission on safety or bike ped, all those things can come forth. We've got this proposal that you heard about bike racks in Oregon City. I know there's Martin's scheduling with the county and the what's the name of the Trails Alliance, Oregon City Trails Alliance, to map out where all those bike locations should be, or bike rack locations should be. Those are the kind of things that this committee may be interested in. But again, I wasn't planning on going through the individual goals. I was more kind of interested in suggesting that we queue that up for a subcommittee meeting.
Quick follow-up here. So in the transportation plan, I can't remember the capital outlays with the specific projects and the timelines and the budgets. That about a dozen pages? I can't remember how long that is.
It's a long list. There's maps associated with it, and I would say it's about a dozen pages if you took an 11 by 17.
Yeah, maybe that would be a good refresher if that was in the packet for our next meeting or when we take up these goals, so everybody has a current copy of that in hand, since that's one of our major tools.
Okay. We can definitely share that.
You'd mentioned that building sidewalks isn't exactly a TAC goal, but you could rephrase that to make it a TAC goal and say, come up with an item that TAC recommends the city commission provide funding for, say, construction of 2,000 lineal feet of sidewalk. That would make it a TAC goal, I would think. Come up with a figure for that the city commission provide funding for it.
Would that help out in the adoption of the budget and give a little bit more credibility to that goal if TAC got behind some of that and used whatever authority we have to support something like that? Would that be an assist
I believe it would. I mean, it'd be nice for the TAC to maybe see that transportation budget and see what we're spending that and decide if that's the kind of thing that they really want to support, that kind of a capital plan, or if they want to change it and add something different, pull something out and add something back. If it's
Well, I think that that's a no-brainer for me, to use the force and authority of this TAC and get behind some of these things, to lend a hand here, so that we can start flexing our muscles, for lack of a better phrase, and support these goals, and start coming out of the shadows, if you will.
Picking up on what Bob's saying, does the Park Advisory Committee and the Library Advisory Committee, do they go into the budget process as advisory committees along with key staff when that staff is making their bids for budget?
Not that I've witnessed, John. I've not seen other committees. Now maybe they're working closely with the staff that manage those committees to help inform the budget. I'm not aware of that. I mean, some of the kind of things that are in the budget for the CIP are, for instance, the signalized intersection at 12th and Washington. That's a biggie. We didn't plan for that.
Yeah.
We're going to consume most of our gas tax additional capital in building that intersection and signalization of that intersection. That's something that the tax supported, and when we heard about that one, that was one of those that helped inform, as pretty much as we plug in the line items, we start thinking about those projects that are kind of important to the community and that have been important to the TAC. So, for instance, the alternate mobility study, that was one that we didn't budget for, but we're funding, right? So we want to make sure we can complete that piece. We've talked about this on this list is the Beaver Creek concept plan. We're working on, piece by piece. It's sewer related, but we're working on trying to get the sewer line built in Beaver Creek Road so that when the time comes to be able to afford to build the roadway, we can do that. So to me, it's this committee is a lot about informing staff, but we haven't necessarily seen a representative unless they show up. Usually Bob shows up in the audience to those kind of things and may raise a concern, but we haven't necessarily seen committee reports at the budget committee. We haven't seen, like, Transportation Advisory Committee come to a budget committee and say we support what's being presented or we don't support what's being presented.
That might be a role for the chairman if we had a process and came up with things that we were specifically supporting.
I think you're right. I think everything should go through the chair by consensus of this committee to assist the staff in presenting things to the commission, that they have the full agreement or whatever of the committee to support this thing. And we don't start not being so bashful about this stuff. It's just an administrative initiative. That's all it is.
Well, I think that if we put some thought and bring some of these to our agenda, some of these kind of items that we can discuss more thoroughly, then we can bring a consensus opinion on whatever issues we decide we want to be involved in. And again, like Bob said, let's not be so bashful.
So
Let's let them know that, by God, the TAC committee is
Exactly.
working hard,
Yeah.
and we've got our opinions, and we want to give you the best advice we can.
So what is the timing for the budget process? If we have a April meeting here and discuss that and come up with half a dozen or a dozen things that we're supporting, will that be in time for your discussions with the budget process?
Yes, it's not perfect. We've put together a draft budget, and this week we're meeting with the city manager to go over that. So the department heads are going over that with the city manager. The first budget committee meeting is May 1st.
Okay,
And
yeah.
in the past, we've had one night. It's required one night to
Right.
get through a approved budget. So it's kind of one of those things where it's worked out by then. But I mean, if there's a specific project, for instance, that the TAC has, that's beyond what, say, for instance, the Sears, that's not really a planned project. Although we did get an email from Nick Dirkman about some past work that we'd done on that one for a grant. So I don't know if that's the same piece of sidewalk you're talking about, but that just came in just today. So, maybe the community's talking about it, but we tend to be driven by, not us, but the TAC and really the community tends to be driven by whatever it is, whatever development proposal happens to be at the table. And that's probably a little bit late for the TAC. But I get that's how people get focused on that. It's more, I think that the annexations are a good time frame to get involved with those because it's before the land use approval, and there's an opportunity to really kind of point out, hey, we've got some, walkability problems in the area that could be resolved through some off-site improvements. And
I think that it's important for all the members here to give input from their different communities, their different neighborhoods, because there's 3 of us here from the Park Place neighborhood, and we know that it's been very, very active land use issues very, very recently. But we really don't know what's going on in the rest of the city in as much detail. So I would like to see those kind of ideas come through staff and back to all of the committee members, feedback on things like that.
if you remember, I guess it's probably been, maybe Lisa remembers 6 months, but there was this debate about development and how TAC could be a part of that process. And that kind of blew up a little bit. And then Laura came and did a pretty extensive presentation on that process. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of calmed back down. And really, there wasn't really a good place for insertion of the TAC into that land use approval process because that's right. Specifically designated. But there was definitely some tools that were made available and that they informed you about how to kind of look at what development's on the table, how to make sure you're on those email mailing lists. And I don't know how many of you actually asked to get on those email mailing lists, but that's kind of, that puts you in the queue, at least as a citizen, maybe not as a group, because the timelines for these developments don't always play out very well with our meeting schedules, right? So instead, you can get in that queue. Maybe it works out well, and you as a member bring that back to the TAC and say, "Here's what I've learned. I'd like to talk about this." But the idea of staff trying to cull through all the development that's in the queue. For one, we've got a bunch of development that's in the queue, and trying to either have other staff here to report on that, or try to get Martin and I and Elisa up to speed with what that development is and what it means to this TAC. It's not really where I don't think the intent of the TAC, and so it's just not developed. We haven't been able to support that level of involvement.
But even when one of these developments comes for like Sears or whatever, when they look at their impacts, they're looking at transportation plans and they're saying, okay, you have to spend money on, and here's an option or select list of projects you need to do, and then developer picks what they're going to take on or pay fee in lieu or whatever.
Right. All those details are worked out. There's just not always, I don't think there's always community trust in that process, right? They don't always necessarily feel like well, yeah, they got to build sidewalks on their property, but they didn't build this connection piece of 100 feet of sidewalk, and that's really where the bottleneck is, and that's what needs to be fixed. And maybe it could have been a condition of approval. I don't know. There are some limitations on how much offsite, we can require, but because of those kind of things, and it's not just transportation, right? There's also stormwater and parks and schools and all the other pieces that, the communities that aren't doing this on a daily basis struggle to understand that process and how best to insert themselves. And I think we've tried to make that easier, but it requires you to keep your finger on the pulse of that process. This committee is, it's large. You're not all interested in the same things, and so trying to address the actual development in Oregon City has been harder for this committee than I think it, because y'all want a little different, input on that.
But we can, like, if we know that there's a missing link, we could bring that and say, okay, John, apparently you guys missed 100 feet of sidewalk, and it seems like it's a potential safety issue. Can you guys look into what would it take to get that remedied?
That's true. That's true. I mean
that's a better kind of maybe approach.
Yeah.
Well,
we've got old
that's
schools.
like what I want to get back to, though, is that certainly the Planning Commission and the City Commission have their 120-day window, and they can't go beyond that. In circumstances it gets continued, of course, but in a situation like this, where the annexation has been approved, by the Planning Commission, I'm sure the City Commission will go along with it. But one of the conditions of approval for the annexation was that the traffic issues at Highway 213 and Redland Road and the intersection of Abernathy, Holcomb, and Redland Road have to be addressed. Those two intersections are part of the conditions of approval for the annexation, and until those problems are solved, there can be no development of that property. Well, we know that somehow that property is going to be developed. Way out past 120 days. My opinion, and you can all tell me if I'm going down the wrong path here, is that the TAC could contribute to the information that the Planning Commission receives when it gets to the point of development by early on looking at these problems and possible solutions or conditions of approval. See, with that kind of a situation, we have a ton of lead time. Now, that's my own personal desire. I'll leave it up to the rest of the people to.
You're right. Annexation is a good time to look at maybe the community needs in that area. Doesn't necessarily mean we can condition all that, but at least we can take a new look at what the transportation system plan says. Do we want to prioritize some of those projects? That's right. Those kind of things can happen. And if we just want to take that Park Place and add it to our list of goals as a focus area, then that's definitely something that we could look at.
Well, I think that what Bob said is appropriate. I think that there's got to be, the circumstances almost demand it, that there's got to be more coordination long-range coordination between TAC and the Planning Commission. And I think it's a matter of just friendly persuasion, if you will. That whatever we say down here in terms of consensus is welcome at the Planning Commission in terms of implementing that as a condition of approval. That I don't want to. It's a matter of attitude, whether or not they're going to welcome our recommendations or not. But I would hope that they would, because traffic is so much a part of land use planning. It's just amazing.
And the last Sears presentation they made, they had almost a full page of information that had been given to the Planning Commission, from the traffic reports to my letter of testimony to you name it, you know. So if a letter of recommendation or advice came from the TAC, it would have to be part of the record.
True. Yeah.
I'm now stepping down from my soapbox.
Gee, were you on one?
Well,
Do we need some clarification for staff then on exactly what we'd like to have them attempt to put into the agenda and work on at the next meeting? So we talked about the CIP, we talked about the goals. Does it make sense to get that packet information the Planning Commission got from the Sears traffic engineer talking about how that intersection, or those intersections were less than functional, as a piece of background information to talk about it? I don't know.
We can package that up and ship it out. Not having seen it, I would, you know.
Yeah, so
well,
for
the
example,
engineers have made some recommendations.
yeah, at the neighborhood meeting, they said the intersection where the traffic lights are 213 in Redland was already at 101% of capacity. And one of the other parts of that intersection were, I don't know, in the 90s or something like that. And so that's before any of the new traffic is added from the developer. So there's some concrete information there that has to be dealt with one way or another, whether we get our oar in the water or not.
So what I learned about that outcome was that we were, it was recommended that we add that, at least the Redland 213 intersection. I don't know about the Holcomb Redland intersection, but the Redland 213, add that to our alternate mobility study as an additional scope item to look at that intersection as well, for, in theory, a new standard by which we determine failure.
But if these are failing intersections,
By the current definition, the mobility study may expand that so that you have
A
more
longer,
space. Yeah.
for instance, the alternate mobility study latest kind of thinking is that instead of a 1 hour period where we're at full capacity and having that being the threshold, going to something longer,
Could be
like
5
3
hours.
to 5 hours, right?
John, do you attend the Planning Commission meetings?
Not typically.
Because I was just wondering, they're always getting new members, and I don't think transportation necessarily is in their minds. And it would be nice if maybe annually they got a very short transportation planning 101, you know, so that when a house gets installed or built, I don't think the Planning Commission knows that there's X amount of trips associated with that new house. Or when a development comes in, there's X amount of trips. And it'd be nice if they just had a short 15-minute primer every year or something, so that there was this 101 transportation class given to them, presentation, so that it just elevates and gets them thinking a little bit more about transportation and how that ties into what they're doing.
but they do. I mean, it's part of the staff report. It talks about traffic and trips that are going to be generated and how they're going to remedy the trips and all that stuff. So it is part of their decision making process.
Well, I don't go to all their meetings, but I know that they're well informed of the planning commission that's there. You're right. There's some turnover, just like on this committee, but and so there's varying levels of understanding of that, I'm sure. But our John Replinger, who's our transportation consultant for development, is often at those meetings and often informs the planning commission on the status of the report, whether it's accurate, inaccurate, whether, how it's going to impact. We are getting into some uncharted territory with these intersections that are at capacity. that's an area where, I mean, we're not the only agency with that problem, but we're the only agency that's kind of being forced to try to get community buy-in with regard to either a fix that's going to cost us a lot of money, or a fix that's going to cost us with a new adopted standard that's going to mean we're going to live with more congestion.
But why would that cost city? I mean, developers wanting to put 10,000 homes or 5,000 homes, why wouldn't they brunt the cost of those improvements to bring them to the desired level of service? Why go to a 5-hour congestion at the intersection when maybe people are only used to seeing 1 hour?
So in the case of Beaver Creek Road, I can't speak to Redland Road. Well, I can speak a little bit to Redland Road. Redland Road.
But this is just in general. It doesn't matter which road. I mean, it could be any road.
Right. So usually when we get to an intersection that reaches capacity, we do require the development to fix it. That's the typical standard that we live within all the time. So if there's a safety problem or if there's a capacity problem, the developer that puts us over the limit is required to fix it. In the case of 213 and Beaver Creek Road in particular, the fix is well beyond what could be expected of any developer. And so,
an alternate way from the developer's point of view, he's only contributing maybe 0.5% of the total volume going through there. So why should he foot the total bill?
True. But usually there's SDC reimbursements, those kind of things that can happen. But when you're talking about an intersection like Beaver Creek and 213, we were talking $50 to $75 million projects. So
I understand in that case. I mean, it's a major intersection, but we're now at the Redland or Holcomb. It's significantly less cost, probably.
Redland was, I think at one point in time, it was an $11 million project. That was a few years ago, back when we did the jug handle. So it's increased over time. I don't know exactly where that estimate is, but they're big price tag projects for something that the region in the past has kind of been able to find funding to help support that, and maybe there's a pay in lieu for a developer, and for all these projects there's probably small tweaks, like we've talked about some of those things that could happen at Beaver Creek and 213 where maybe there's a prohibiting some of the left turn action there that would kind of allow for a little bit more time, or maybe there's more of a acceleration lane for that traffic that wants to go from Beaver Creek, from driving out near the high school towards 213 and then turning north onto 213. Maybe there's an acceleration lane. We've talked about those kind of fixes, but they're just small fixes when you look at the overall problem. And to really get you to a standard that we have today, which is 1 hour at full capacity, then we are,
We're not
today,
developing
even
anything.
today, and with the future development, it's either going to squash development or we're going to live with a different standard, and that's where this alternate mobility standards, what I've come to learn, because it's been taking me a while to figure out what it really means to have an alternate mobility standard and an alternate mobility standard study. It's really kind of taking all the options and throwing them out there and trying to put a value to some of those, trying to look at how we might look at different forms of measuring that standard, and then trying to get community buy-in from a broad community, not just citizens. I mean, we've got folks on this alternate mobility study that are from the different agencies as well as from inside and outside the city, right? So I think it's a good process, but at the end of the day, it's, do you spend a lot of money on a project that might fix that particular bottleneck only to move it down the road to another location? Let's say 205, for instance. So during peak hour, traffic actually moves pretty good through Beaver Creek and 213, regardless of what it used to be 10 years ago, maybe. But it moves through there. I mean, I've driven through there at peak hour. You might have to sit through the signal once or twice, right? But you get to 213, I mean, you get to 205, and you get on once you get on the freeway itself, if you're heading north at 5 o'clock, you're sitting in traffic, right? So that's the challenge that we have in the metro region. It's just a lot of facilities are overloaded, and trying to build our way out of that's been a challenge.
What we're really talking about here is the planning process. And the planning process in Oregon has not been tested, except initially with the Fasano decision, which defined the role of the Planning Commission as being quasi-judicial. And until people got used to that, and we're talking some real serious stuff here, because we're talking making decisions based that affect hundreds of millions of dollars. Public funds for improvement of intersections, highways, private investment, infrastructure, things of that nature. And if you don't think I'm right, you go look at the LUBA or the Court of Appeals. Now, until we get to the point where it's understood that the Planning Commission has the authority to regulate these things by condition of approval, i.e., we're not going to accept any more annexations because of what it's going to do to our infrastructure. Therefore, we're not going to issue any more building permits until we get up to speed in the interest of the public sector. We're going to be fighting these battles amongst ourselves and the public until that subject is decided, either by the courts or a political mandate by the commission. We've had enough. Now we're going to do it this way. We're going to take it out of low gear, put it into second gear, and maybe into high gear, because we're going to start controlling the future of these of our community. And what it's going to rest on is we don't have the money to solve these problems. Therefore, we're going to slow down and catch our breath. Until that decision's been made, we're going to be wrestling with these problems forever. So that's where I see it. If we had the money to bring our infrastructure up to date, to collect and correct these transportation problems, we wouldn't be talking like this. We'd just say, okay, now bring it on. So until that answer is forthcoming, either from these commissions or from a court case, and eventually it'll end up in court, because how many LUBA decisions have we had in the last couple of years? 3 that I know of. We're appeal city. Every time we make a decision, somebody appeals it. So really, I mean, Beaver Creek, what's the other one? It escapes me, but you know, and we keep winning because that means our staff is doing the job. But eventually, we're going to either have to shut down the system and say no more building, or we're going to have to address these infrastructure issues.
Okay. We'll have a little mini meeting.
Yeah, we need to figure out what we want to focus on, Bob. We're taking some pretty big bites at the apple tonight, but yeah, I think we should get together and figure out what this committee can take on. And it's keeping in mind this is a volunteer board, and you know, so our work plan needs to reflect
I'll
that.
volunteer myself half to death if I have to, just to get the job done. Let's move on to the Public Works report.
So there's several items on here that I'll cover, and then a few more that aren't on the list. But I mentioned a little bit about the 12th and Washington signalization project. So I think you remember that project. It's a project that was it's been an intersection that we've been watching for several years. We've studied it several years, and it's finally met signal warrant thresholds. So we've been moving forward with the design phase of that, and we're about 90%. We're budgeting most of that project for next year. So the intent would be to build that project next year. So right now, the project manager that's working on that's Dana Webb, and she's she just sent us an email recently that said, "Hey, I've got the 90% plans. I'll be routing them pretty soon to folks to take a look at." Now, we still have some issues to work out with the overhead utilities because most of those are in the way of the signal.
You want some of my medicine?
Yeah. So, moving forward, it's an expensive little project. Trying to put signal poles at that location, if you're familiar with that location, it's tight. And trying to meet ADA compliance issues and get the poles out of the sidewalks and not interfere too much with the existing retaining walls, it's going to be a challenge. But that's where that project's at.
Do you guys have ability to underground some of that private utilities, their overhang?
We're talking to the private utilities about that. There's some high voltage wires as well that's much more challenging to put underground. But there is some items that we'd like to see go underground or go much, much higher. So that's the status of that one. Any questions on that?
When those signals get in during very snowy weather, could that be changed to a flashing yellow going downhill?
It can't, Bob. We did ask that question, and because it's the community's asked it, and we have some steep slopes down at 14th Street, so kind of got the same problem down there.
Yeah.
We just want to make sure we got good visibility there, and signal timing. We are going to interconnect the signal timing between 14th, 15th, and and Abernathy. All those will be interconnected, so that may help. But I still think it's going to be a challenge in the winter weather conditions, just because the grade is so drastic there. Main Street and the Cove. So that project is really just struggling for a couple reasons. One is the ground conditions that they found in the Cove. As you know, most of that project is really a balanced cut and fill project. So they're obligated to remove, I don't remember the number of yards, but a lot of material out of the area behind the wastewater treatment plant, which we're calling the North Park, and move it over to the Lot 2, which is behind the Oregon City Shopping Center. And that is almost done, not far, but they've run into some, I know you've seen the mountains of concrete out there. They've run into a lot of concrete out there, a lot more than they had originally intended, so that the existing ground conditions have been problematic for them. The weather has been problematic for them in that they counted on weather. Martin was reminding me about how the contractor said, "Hey, we've done lots of things in the wintertime. We know Oregon winters." Well, they underestimated this Oregon winter because it's been a challenge for them, along with all those obstructions that have been in the soil there. They're having to cement treat all the soil that they're digging out, and as they're placing it on the site where the apartments will go. So that slowed them down. And with that comes, erosion control like they were never anticipating. And then about a couple weeks ago, the area where the roundabout is located, and there's a large diameter storm line that they're needing to replace. And I would call it probably the northeast quadrant of the roundabout, and where that storm line is happened to be on the edge of the landfill. So we've gotten into some landfill material that we, based on prior mapping, showed not in that area. So there's some soils in there that aren't exactly landfill. They're more kind of a trashy material, but they're dealing with all those kind of things. So that project's delayed. They're still anticipating completing the project probably more towards the end of May, but as opposed to, I think the way it was posted was spring. Every one of their schedules that they have submitted have been optimistic, I would say, And so we're just trying to work through that with them. We think they're a good earth moving contractor and they're doing a good job with the work, but it has just been a struggle from really day one on that project. So
Sounds like all they need is a 100-year flood.
that's coming. The tides are rising there. We were looking at that this afternoon too. It seems like,
River's high.
yeah, the river is very high. Okay, so that's the Cove. Any questions on the Cove or the Main Street piece?
Does that basically mean that Main Street won't be open until maybe August?
Well, I hope sooner than that, but definitely looks like late May. I guess for those of you that care much and attend the Teddy Bear Parade, the Teddy Bear Parade typically goes down Main Street and down Main Street Extension to the Clackamas Park. Because of this incident, that usually happens in May.
I would make an alternate route, I think.
Yeah. So Martin's doing the lion's share of that work of trying to figure out with that event coordinator, that group, to make sure we can find an alternate route, which now looks like it's probably going to end at the end of the Oregon Trail. Lynn Avenue. So the sewer moratorium project up on Lynn Avenue, the sewer work is done. We're just really struggling with patchwork up there. And so tomorrow morning, I would say avoid Lynn Avenue. They're going to be using interim traffic control, but they're going to be trying to do some more interim temporary patching. The long-term fix there, and we're hoping it's not too far long-term, but we just need a good break in the weather of about a week to be able to tear out what we damaged and patch that with a heavy patch, and then we're going to mill off the top 2 inches and really fix it right. So that's all weather dependent. We really wouldn't want to try and take something on right now, but
May,
we're
possibly.
hoping sooner. I mean, we're hoping for a little bit of an Indian spring that we could get in there. We're actually doing our plan is to do it. So S2 Contracting won the bid for the Beaver Creek Road left turn lanes down near 213, that extension of those turn lanes. And so our intent, we got a quote from them and we got a quote from the contractor that did the sewer work, and we decided we're going to write a change order with S2 and have them do the work. They're the ones that also did our annual pavement maintenance contract last year. They did a good job with that project, so we're looking forward to working with them on that.
John, I have a question that I know you can't answer right away, but I thought it might be worth looking into. My memory says it may be possible to have an emergency speed limit that doesn't have to go through the speed control board for situations like Lynn Avenue where, 15 mile an hour is about 5 mile an hour too fast.
You mean while it's rough?
Yeah, just while it's rough, and because I have been using that periodically because I live there, and I've noticed that at 15 to 20 mile an hour is about as fast as is reasonable. And before I get through it, I've collected 3 or 4 cars. And I know you guys are getting complaints about potential car damage and tires and whatnot. And it just strikes me that if we made it possible to make that a ticketable offense, that maybe it might help.
Okay, haven't heard of that, but we can look into that, Henry.
Wouldn't that be
Okay.
a construction speed limit?
Yeah, I think it would be, and I don't. We've not had to issue many of those or any of those that I can ever think of. They're usually more for freeway kind of construction speed limit. But I'm trying to think of a situation where we've actually tried to reach out to the state and get that kind of a decision. But Martin's noted that, so we'll add that to the list. Malala Avenue and the Streetscape Metro grant. No change there other than we've got the grant. We just don't. We have yet to figure out with Metro timing and we've been pressing them for an early start on that because we'd like to get moving with the surveying and the right-of-way acquisition and maybe the undergrounding of utilities. So we've reached out to Metro and kind of trying to get them to figure out when they can sit down with us and start talking about that. But the good news is it's a $3.8 million grant, and we're probably going to spend every bit of it.
You guys are matching same?
We're matching with $4 million, so pretty close. Yeah. We talked quite a bit about the alternate mobility study. I would just say that we've had 2 technical advisory committee meetings and 2 citizen advisory committee meetings. Henry's on that.
And
Bob's on that committee. They've been good meetings, really informative meetings. Last meeting we had, they shared some information that I can't remember if I've shared with this group, but they collected data. They called it Blue Mac data. Did I talk about this already?
Not to us.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. They actually took receivers and placed them on each leg of the intersection, all 4 legs of the intersection. And with that Blue Max data, they can collect data off of Bluetooth devices or cell phones if you have your GPS on, and they can measure the time that it takes you to get from one receiver to the other receiver. And that was real informative because they were able to break that out by the all the different movements. So each leg of the intersection has basically 3 movements. So there was 12 movements that they were graphing and showing. They collected data for like 7 days, 24 hours a day, using that Bluebeam data collection. And they were kind of showing peak hour, how long it took in some cases to get through the intersection. I don't remember all the stats, but it seemed like there was about 200 seconds was kind of a target number that it seemed to take during the peak hour. And we definitely saw a peak at the morning peak and at the evening peak around 7:30 and around 5:30, kind of like what you would expect. And with that, they're actually able to further extrapolate out what the build-out delay might be if no changes were to happen there. And they were able to align that with some of the volume over capacity data that we're used to looking at, and being able to align that with the new kind of travel time information. So I thought it was a useful exercise. A lot of good data, not easy to collect, not very cheap to collect. We spent a fair amount of money collecting
And
that data.
it's pretty solid data too, in the sense that statistically, it's a good representation of what's actually going through there by activity. That is to say, if you're going straight, it tracks it going straight. If you're making a left turn, it tracks it as a left turn. If you're going right, it tracks you as a right turn. So that kind of data is hard to get and expensive to get.
Yeah. The only problem was if drivers that went to Sherry's and stayed at Sherry's for an hour, we had some really long travel times through the intersection. But other than that, they were able to clean up most of the data and do a pretty good job with it. So, I think after the last citizen committee, there was pretty good consensus that, for one, we needed to continue to use the measurement standard, which is the volume over capacity, because that's what's acceptable in the region. Trying to collect travel time data would be, not only was it expensive this one time, but imagine every developer having to come through to meet a travel time standard and try to collect that same kind of data, have it be meaningful. So the group kind of landed on the fact that, yes, we should stick with the same standard that the development community, the agency folks are all used to. And then we did look at, there are several scenarios in terms of safety improvements that should probably happen along that corridor, and maybe some efficiency improvements that could happen. We talked a little bit about the prohibiting left turns. That was one. Widening shoulders, those kind of things. And then the other one was just looking at confirming how much time it made sense to extend a standard for living with a longer period of kind of peak hour. So instead of it being a peak hour, it would be a peak multi-hour.
And that's really what the alternative mobility is all about. It's about alternative ways of measuring vehicle traffic through the intersection. It's not really about how to get all sorts of different types of transportation through there. It's just limited to the vehicles.
Right.
Any interesting ideas that have been proposed that we would like to hear about?
Well,
I heard about coming down Beaver Creek and turning right to go down 205 to building not an on-ramp, but a,
Acceleration lane.
what do they call that? Lane. Adding a lane there so that it can, instead of yielding or stopping, having to stop at that right turn lane, they can go on to 205 on a long approach.
There was that, and another one that's really more interesting is they were talking about reverse flow for the left turns off of Beaver Creek, where you'd have to go down the right lane like you do normally to a certain point, cross over oncoming traffic to the far left, go down and turn and go onto 2013, which is a good concept. It's used in various places in the United States and Europe, but mostly on overpasses, where both lanes cross like that, and then you got a free left to get on. So it's new, it's different, and it does help the passage of the vehicles through the intersection, but soon it would be outdated too.
Yeah, they looked at 3 left turn lanes off of 213 onto Beaver Creek, kind of headed towards the high school. That was one. The state didn't like that one, and most of us didn't really. So, and they even looked at some interchanges, but that's when you took a project that might be, adding a acceleration lane on 213 is maybe $5 million project versus an interchange, which is a $50 or $75 million project. And the state was there, as was the county at the last meeting, and they were able to kind of share. There's two high priorities, and unless there's some big federal check that's going to come down the road, it's not, they don't see any solutions like that will ever be any resources that will be pointed towards that corridor at large enough to cover a new interchange or something close to it. Is that kind of what you saw, Bob, or heard?
How does this stock in relationship to some other intersections similar to this in Pearl metro area? Is this kind of average? 120 seconds?
I think there's a lot of intersections like this in the metro area. We're just kind of we're on the edge, and the state's interested in seeing us go through this process. They really are. And I think you're going to see more agencies having to go through it. We're just kind of the guinea pig.
Really, the bottom line you end up with after you go into those meetings is that there's not enough money in the world to make it happen.
Until the community decides to pay for it itself, I guess.
Summer construction.
Still, there's not enough money.
How about a fixed income?
You and me both. Yeah.
So for this summer construction update, I wanted to talk about the 99E Bluff water line. And can you pull up that presentation? We'll go through this really quick. So, is there a clicker? It's on your. You want to show Edward how to do that?
Oh, okay.
So you probably, this is a close-up looking up the pipe, but along Highway 99E, really between South Second and the tunnel, there's a public water line that is clamped to the side of the mountain there, and it needs to be replaced. So we've seen some problems with that, especially since the mill closed, because before the mill had such high water consumption that there was a lot of water movement through there. this problem happened after after the mill pretty much shut down water use, and then that line froze and burst, and that was our first indication that we kind of had some problems up there. That pipeline's not in very good condition. So we looked at it, and overall we've got lots of leaks, or not lots of leaks, but lots of concerns for thin-walled pipe that could continue to be a problem like this. So project, we're basically going to remove that. We've got to pull back the rockfall protection fencing, and that's pretty much bolted to the face of the rock. Remove the 10-inch pipe that's there, and as a lot of the rock anchors that it's hung by, and peel the mesh back, reestablish rock anchors for both the rockfall protection and the pipe itself, and then bolt the new pipeline in place. And at the same time, it's our plan to once we cut it down near where the Jersey barrier is there, we'll drop a camera down in there, because we don't know a lot about the pipeline as it crosses under 99E and crosses under the railroad tracks. So that's really the quote work. But in order to get there, we've got to also build divert traffic. So we're going to divert 99E traffic into a single lane in each direction for 10 days. And the barrier there, because there's concern that, well, if something falls, what can we do to protect vehicles to the best ability that we can? So there's going to be some rockfall protection that's going to be out on the roadway as well.
Did you look at using in situ form sock on this?
No, because that has had some problems associated with it, and we just think that the right way to fix this thing is with replacement.
There's no way to route that pipe somewhere else, so it's not on that
We've
face.
looked, and there's not a good way to get across. The preference would be if they ever
Put
build
back in the
a
road?
elevated. Well, they're talking about a stairway or a building or an elevator on the kind of the south end of the Willamette Falls Legacy project, and have a new pedestrian crossing. That might be an opportunity, but whether that's going to go at 3rd Street or somewhere further to the south, at this point in time, we need that. That pipeline is really provides redundant service to the downtown. Its main feed was for the mill site, but it provides the heavy pressure that we need in the downtown area. And,
But there's no way to take it around and put it back in a 99 and just have it in the road?
No, because there's no. That's kind of the end of the system for Main Street. So
Okay.
somehow we got to get connected back down near 5th and Main. And so, yeah,
Will there be some kind of freeze protection for the new pipe?
there will be. Yeah, yeah, it's going to be heated, so we won't have that problem.
Great.
So it's 10-day lane closure of 2 lanes, 24 hours a day. The schedule is to start that on a Friday after 11. Or at 11 a.m. And there's a few date options, but the idea is to get it done between Memorial Day and 4th of July to try and avoid that those holidays. Impacts to the promenade are going to, if the contractor chooses to use the promenade, and I'm sure they will, then there'll be a detour route that'll probably take pedestrians out onto High Street.
High Street.
High Street. And there's obviously dealing with freight. There's some noticing requirements, and you'll see message boards out there. But if you use that section of 99E at all, it's going to be kind of a mess.
Is there any coordination with the police department or the state police if during that construction there's a serious accident at one end or the other or the middle, to speed up the reopening of that area? Because I know frequently when there's an accident, it seems like it takes an awful long time to clear up the scene.
Oh, you mean further out on? Because
Well,
usually
let's say
where
that there was a accident downhill just as someone cleared the tunnel. Well, you can imagine the backup that would cause, because they'd have to close then the remaining 2 lanes.
Police and fire are aware of the closure. Whether we've talked to them about providing faster service, I'm not sure, but we can add that to the list of concerns.
I'm thinking faster service to clear the area to resume traffic, not necessarily the time to get there.
Yeah. You think you got an answer for that one? Offline? Yeah, we can talk about it. I think it's one little piece that's important for you to know, and maybe I'll point it out on the screen up here. So the lane closure is going to start, if you want to turn around and look at the screen, it's going to start at South 2nd. We're going to start transitioning lanes over. So by the time you get to, Tumwater, that you won't be able to make that shortcut turn if you ever use that. By the way, I don't recommend you use that shortcut turn. I drive it all the time, and I never use that. It's just a little dangerous. But so it'll be 2 lanes, 1 lane in each direction, all the way down through the tunnel. They're going to open it up for pretty much the full width, but I think they get to 16 feet wide. So the idea there is trucks and those wider vehicles, we still want to make sure they can negotiate that. But the intent would still be 2 lanes through the intersection with Main Street, and it really won't open back up again until it gets back out here. So
Why so far past the construction?
just because they want to minimize the conflict of crossing traffic, and they want to make it very clear that vehicles can't. Right now, you can make a left turn here. So if you're heading southbound on 99, you can make a left turn on Main Street. That movement will be prohibited, and so that's kind of the main reason.
Another one is that I've noticed is that if you've got a long semi, like a 53-foot box or something going through there, they take about 1.5 lanes to go through that S curve on each one of the curves.
Yeah.
Especially the tunnel, in order to keep from scraping the sides of it.
The city and the consultant that we've hired and ODOT spent a fair amount of time figuring out and I wasn't part of those meetings, but my guess is it's really about just moving truck traffic. Although the other notice piece is going to be to try to get trucks off that route. So have them go out I-5 route as opposed to this route. But yeah, just try to keep people slow, keep them channelized, and keep them from having too many conflict points along that route. That's the main reason.
That no left turn onto Main Street and Railroad Avenue will be interesting, because when you come off the Arch Bridge, there's supposed to be no left turn there too.
Yeah, and they still do it, don't they?
Oh, right.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah, the difference is there will be cones, pretty tight cone delineation.
Pretty much a good barricade from.
Right.
Yeah.
At the other location, there is no barrier to prevent that.
Yeah. Just pedestrians.
So lots of outreach through various forms, so people will know what to expect. So we're reaching out to not only our own community, but the county and probably Canby. We're giving the contractor 24 hours a day to work, but we've got a contractor that's going to do the work. And that's what I think it's Wildish that's actually doing this. Mm-hmm. And the dollar amount. You remember the dollar amount? It was $260,000 to do the work. And so they've got 24 hours, but because of the kind of the complexity of the work, it's probably not going to happen in anything but daylight hours.
Another thing you guys should know is ODOT is very interested in how we execute this, because they're coming in possibly next summer with a much more impactful project, and they want to see some lessons learned on how we implement it, because they're going to be replacing all of the rockfall protection on that portion of the bluff there.
So they're evaluating that because they're a little worried about the cost and the need for that. But yeah, that's coming.
So I have a question. Why didn't you guys then wait to do the pipe at the same time that ODOT is
Because
doing
their
it?
project isn't fully defined yet.
And yours can't wait another year?
Yeah, we're not excited about living another year with that liability sitting there.
It wouldn't take much for that to just kind of turn into a one-way water pipe onto the highway.
Yeah, there's also other factors on the actual Blue Heron property, which require us to kind of move. They've had to shut down some of their internal piping, and we need to make sure that we've still got the loop going through there, and this is the weak link.
No,
ODOT
that was just a question.
Yeah, ODOT wasn't really that keen on kind of our project messing with their project either, so they're a good partner. Keep saying that. They're a good partner. They're a good partner. They're a good partner. Lots of ways of reaching out to folks, so you'll see more of any social media whatsoever. And yeah, these are some of the other projects that Martin was talking about. There's also an illumination project that the city's actually participating with them on. So it's both to replace the lighting inside the tunnel, so it'll be brighter in there at some point in time. And then there's also going to be some electronic signage, message board signage that'll be, if you're coming down 99E into the tunnel, there's a sign there now, and there's a flashing light. There'll be a lot more advanced warning for traffic that's backed up, and it'll be more smart signage so that drivers that are accelerating down the hill on 99E before they get to the tunnel have a little more warning about what's going on in the tunnel. And that was a condition of the Willamette Falls Legacy project. So the state required that in the land use approval for the initial land use approval for that project. So I think we contribute $250,000 to the pedestrian signing, what we call the ITS signage.
When's the last time there was a serious accident?
I don't track that, Bob. I don't know if have you seen anything like that?
Obviously,
There have been accidents out of that corridor, but I can't explicitly say
It's been a while.
when it's been in the tunnel. There was a serious accident out there, Lisa, was about a month and a half ago? Traffic was backing up all through the neighborhood. They had it shut down, but it wasn't in the tunnel.
I'll go on to the next one unless you have some questions. Just wanted to talk a little bit about Myers Road. So we are, this is the Myers Road connection between Highway 213 and the piece that the high school built. So connecting those two legs up, we've been meeting with so there's a right-of-way effort that's going on, right-of-way acquisition that's kind of in process. We've just gotten through we're almost through appraisal values so that we can start working with those property owners on land acquisition. And then there's also a consultant scope of work that's going to put together the design effort, and that's a big contract. There were some questions about how much work we were going to be doing on 213, and so we're incorporating all the 213 work with Myers Road, and I think we're going to spend close to $650,000 on engineering work for that work, and so we're about to finalize that scope of work and fee and award a contract to OBEC. And so that's coming up. So that project's moving forward, and the idea there would be to actually have a design that we could actually afford to build and move forward with it. So we'll also be extending the water and the sewer through there as well.
I was out there a couple of weeks ago, and it looks like the high school built the part that was going to be by the park and the bus barn.
Yes.
Does that go all the way back to the edge of the property?
So
Question.
we'll be marrying up with that end.
So when that connection is built, will that relieve some of the congestion at Beaver Creek in 213?
That's the idea. Yeah.
Do they have any estimates, a range, like 25% improvement or anything like that?
I haven't seen anything quite like that. We just know for the long range, that's a needed connection. So for for full build out, we need that connection. I think, what it's going to mean, current conditions, there's probably a traffic analysis that would show that. I don't have it.
And how do you determine how much SDCs to attribute to that from your SDC revenue?
So that project is 100% capacity. So there's, it's not like taking an existing route and building it larger. So there's no traffic on it today, and any traffic that'll be on it in the future is all future traffic, right? So in our SDC analysis, 100% of the cost of that project is SDC reimbursable. Now, at the end of the design and we look at the project cost, do we have we estimated high enough in our SDC rate analysis? That's a question I can't answer, but I suspect we probably haven't collected enough in SDCs, but we're going to fund the whole thing out of SDCs.
Will you do any LID for the benefiting abutting properties that will be opened up to development?
We're working on not an LID, but like I said, we've still got right-of-way acquisition to negotiate with those folks, and of course, any development out there would be required to pay SDCs.
So probably in lieu of collecting, I guess you're purchasing right away, but are you giving them some credits back or you just, in terms of SDC credits back for their future development? Is that something?
Well, I don't think they'll be getting SDC credits. I think we're going to end up paying for the project, and they're going to have to pay their full SDCs. So that's whether we would collect enough from all those property owners and SDCs. I don't know that, but
so would you actually physically build the road before some developers were ready to develop, or would you wait for that?
No, we would build the road first.
Good.
That's our intent. I mean, we haven't seen any development applications come through there, and I doubt they're going to bring them now that we're jumping into right-of-way acquisition negotiations. So, community college is the only. I should caveat that the community college is obviously moving forward with their development. This phase, they're not really required to do the transportation improvements at 213, but they do have a condition for that. So, the community college is participating in the project.
Thank you.
This will probably help Glen Oak Road more than it will Beaver Creek.
Yeah, I
Glen
agree.
Oak and 213.
Yeah. The other little project that's out there is the roundabout at Lynn, Leland, Warner Parrott, Warner Milne, Central Point. You remember the 5-leg roundabout? So that, if you remember, that project was essentially approved through the corridor plan. We went to some extra special effort to kind of further analyze whether that was truly the right fix or not, and the determination was yes, that it was. So I'd like to keep that one moving forward with some pre-design work that would include surveying, so we could really kind of figure out where the right-of-way dedication will need to be on that project, so we can keep moving forward. If the police department continues to move forward with their plans to develop on that corner where Mount Pleasant is, we want to make sure we fully understand where the edge of the right-of-way needs to be. So that's a scope of work that's.
If it would help, I think that the TAC would probably be able to supply a recommendation.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
For our previous conversation.
Yeah.
We could discuss it.
You wanted a 5-lane roundabout, right? So that's moving along. I mentioned the Beaver Creek left turn lanes project. I think they wanted to actually start putting traffic control out there this week, and we asked them to. We're a little worried about weather. I mean, they don't need a lot of time to do that project, but last thing we kind of wanted was yet another project that was struggling with weather problems. So, but we've got S2 construction that's building that project, and most of the median that's out there now is going to go away. So all those trees will be the first thing you'll notice if you use that route at all. They'll be removing the trees first thing.
Do you guys have to mitigate for those trees?
No.
Not like Beaverton, you do. Beaverton, you do. Inch for inch.
Yeah, no.
No, for each inch, it's 10 inches, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we don't. So that's a kind of a. I'm 90% sure we don't. But if you're really interested in that, I can find out.
No, I was.
So other than that, paving projects are 15th Street's the biggie.
So the PMA projects for this summer, the biggest thing,
excuse me, is going to be 15th Street. If you recall, last summer we replaced the water main down there, which was a critical need for us. So to be able to afford to replace the water main, we took the pressure off of the project by deferring the pavement work and funding that through PMUF because we knew the road needed to be redone as well. So this summer they're coming back in. We're going to be putting the bid out. Let's see, we're advertising next week, and then opening bids mid-April with the intent to award and a notice to proceed by early June, and then allowing the contractor to start just before the new fiscal year rolls in, with the intent of having construction completed by mid-August to late August, depending on weather. The rest of the PMUF areas aren't going to be as impactful because they're primarily residential streets. High Street was previously on there, but it got moved because of other projects and cost. I think the other big ones you're going to see are out along Rivercrest Park, or a couple areas out there that we're going to be hitting. Jersey and, oh God, what's the other road?
Barker? No.
Slipping my mind. It's the one with the parking spots that are running next to Rivercrest Park. We'll also be taking those parking spots and redoing those as well as another assist to the Parks and Recreation Department. And then
Van Buren.
Van Buren is on the PMUF list, but we're going to do that in continuation with 15th Street. It's going to be the exact same time. So Van Buren will be from 15th all the way back out to 12th. If anybody's going to any of the two-a-days for the high school football team, might be impacted with that. But other than that, no other major impacts for the transportation
Question on the
system.
15th.
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture it. Some of that doesn't have curb and gutter, correct?
Mhm.
So are you going to improve all of that so it'll be urban section the whole way?
There'll be some new curb and gutter coming in, and there's also a little over 100 feet of new sidewalk that'll be installed in conjunction with it. All of the ADA ramps will be redone. And there'll be some minor stormwater improvements out there that we'll need to do, but nothing significant on the other utilities.
It's going to be mandatory that all TAC members use this new piece of sidewalk because it's about 18% grade going from pretty much the Abernathy Center up the block there. So we'll have a new piece of sidewalk there, and I think it's probably our steepest piece of sidewalk in town.
I'll do it. I've done this. I've done that every set of stairs in town. I don't know why I can't do that.
Oh, you're just a bragger, aren't you?
So the biggest impacts for that, same thing as last year, up and downs to the hospital.
Yeah.
So we'll be working with the hospital. I've already sent my counterpart at the hospital an email with preliminary plans and proposed schedule to let him know this is coming.
All right, that's a lot. There's a lot going on still.
Could you send me a map that you've provided in the past that shows all the summer paving construction projects?
We're going to have to do that soon.
We had a neighborhood meeting last night, and the discussion of potholes came up, and then that further went on to, what is the city doing for their pavement maintenance fees? And so I kind of medium tried to defend you guys and told them that if possible I'd bring a meeting or that map to the next general meeting to show everybody the projects that Public Works really does get involved in, and they have no idea how expensive those projects are.
Those were some nasty potholes we had on 213 last week.
I don't know. I haven't heard of the ones on 213, but that's an ODOT facility.
Yeah, there was 2 on the northbound left-hand lane.
The hardest thing we've had with potholes going on, and believe me, Lisa knows probably better than anybody. She gets the call or the email. And then Matt and I have to prepare the response or schedule the work. This weather that we've been having is non-conducive to going out and doing a really good pothole repair. The tack wagon was down for a little bit, and then it was either too cold or too wet to go out there and really do a proper repair. So it's been a lot of cold mix, which has been going down. And the cold mix is literally a Band-Aid. It's just going to fill the void, and it's going to get beat out, and we'll be back out there fixing that again. But to do a proper repair, we have to wait for the ambient temperatures and the precipitation to kind of come down a bit to try and tackle it.
The worst area I've traveled was that Malala Avenue up near Fred Meyer's. A huge amount of potholes up there. You guys have
Did you notice
done a
we
great
milled
job.
that out? And Did you notice that we milled that out? We took the milling machine up
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
We got a 2-day window of no rain. And we took the milling machine out there and we literally milled 65 feet of 2 lanes or 2 5-foot cuts down to about 2 inches, and then just laid in fresh new asphalt in there because it was so bad, and we admit it needed to be done. That was the best approach to try and tackle it than just try and do little piecemeal pothole repairs.
Yeah. You guys did a good job up there.
Good
I mean,
thing.
potholes,
Okay, I guess that's it. John, would you
potholes
like
are
to
going to be a
introduce
problem
our
for
new
us
member?
because there's just a lot of them, and this winter has been a challenge. And it's not just us. If you drive outside Oregon City, they're everywhere.
Well, people come to the neighborhood meetings to air their complaints. We have a very active group in Park Place.
Bob, I have a question. Lisa sent out an email yesterday that said that we were supposed to come up with a member for the boardwalk transportation Riverwalk transportation component of that plan with 3 or 4 meetings over the summer.
Yes, 3 meetings.
Has it been updated?
And so she was going to lead us through, I think, the ramifications and the qualifications of what they would like to see.
Yeah, I'm hoping you all took a look at that email. The Willamette Falls Legacy Project Riverwalk is working on the transportation and parking part of the plan. So they're going to plan a summit, and they'd like 1 TAC member as a volunteer, if possible. They have 3 meeting dates, April 26th, May 24th, and July 26th, and they're hoping that 1 person can attend all 3. Everyone else is welcome to attend as well, but they want that 1 TAC volunteer to be able to commit to all 3 meetings. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at that email yet. Get an idea.
I know I volunteered for the Beaver Creek one, and I know there are those on the committee who might want to volunteer for this one in place of me, but if no one else does, I will look at that.
It is going to address all forms of transportation as well, pedestrian, transit, bike, and parking improvements for the future phases of the Riverwalk. So.
This group had a goal in 2015 of, and it was specific to the parking lot next to McDonald's down near Clackamas Park. And my guess is that's going to be one focus area. There'll probably be several, but so I don't remember who was passionate about that. But
that was at a point where the city commission was attempting to sell the other half of the old treatment plant site.
Yeah.
And it was
it's still for sale.
And it was pointed out that is an overflow for the park when there's an event in the park that shuts down most of the parking over there.
I've been adamantly opposed to selling that.
Here.
I think, make it
It's
three.
not me that's selling it. Don't.
I know, but you were looking for the person that was,
Well, then, I guess my point on this one is there's, this that's going to be one of those topics. And, I suspect in this kind of solution for parking.
A question along those lines is having this discussion jarred my memory banks a little bit. 15 or 20 years ago, there was a look at doing something really similar, which was making a walkway from Clackamas to where that overlook down by the Smurf plant is now. Also tied in with the boat dock under the bridge.
Yeah, that's their view. The idea was it would be wider,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's still on the table, just because of that.
Basically on top of the sewer line that's there.
Well, I mean, we've got the Riverwalk that's already there up
Yeah.
to 10th Street, right?
Yeah, and the Tri-Cities has a sewer line that runs on the other side of that wall. It's on the riverbank, all the way down, past the bridge to the mill.
Well, those details haven't really been. There's probably lots of ideas there, but the idea is to get a wider pathway, kind of like what we have, really between Sportcraft Landing and
Right.
and 10th Street,
So-
all
so-
the way around the corner,
Right.
down to the mill site.
Yeah, that was pretty much the approach I'm remembering from like 15 years ago.
I can attend those meetings. I just have to check the July one because see if I may be on vacation, but I think I'm in town.
How many members are they asking for? Just one, or
One.
three?
They're asking for one.
Okay. So, Bob, do you want Sedemere to?
let's do
You want-
Sedemere, because Henry's already involved in some other things.
You want to check that calendar?
Yeah, I'll
and
check
make-
my calendar and
'cause
let back to Lisa.
That might be that's the recommendations, so that'd be a key meeting.
Yeah. So I'll check.
Yeah, we've got the maps on
I take it those are Thursdays?
the project folders.
I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah.
That would be my bet because they always schedule this room for Thursday. It's the only day it's free.
First one is a Wednesday.
Anything else from staff?
Well, let's not forget when you want to introduce our new tech member. And no, I don't think I have anything else.
Well, welcome to Edward Lyman.
Thank you.
I'm glad we finally got the position filled after all those delays from the winter interviews. I thought Old Man Winter had something against the TAC personally there for a while.
So
Anything you'd like to tell us about yourself? Of course, you probably told the rest of the guys, but I wasn't at your interviews.
I prefer to be called Ed.
Ed, okay. Good.
One thing, Ed, we did talk about kind of a subcommittee of maybe Bob and Henry about goals for the next year. And often new tech members have some ideas about what they'd like to work on. So you might want to figure out how to. Is Ed on? It must be on our email list right now. So you've got your co-committee members' emails. So probably focus on Bob LaSalle or Henry on ideas.
Okay, future agenda items. Let's see, there was one I was wanting to talk about. What was it? Well, of course, the safety campaign. One thing was brought up about that was possibility of buying some banners, across street banners, like the farmers market has.
Oh, you mean the one at Molal's there that goes across Molal Avenue?
Yeah. That's a thought we might think about.
That's city's infrastructure,
Mhm.
and then the banner just gets mounted to the wires, or
It's actually not city infrastructure, it's PGE poles. And, yeah, the cross street banners,
yeah.
they're PGE poles.
So when one wants to put something display on those, they have to go to PGE and get the permission, or
You get a joint permit from us and PGE. Actually, Lisa administers it.
okay.
We do the hoisting. And so everyone's clear, about 6 months ago, we were advised by PGE that they'd recently completed a classification study of all of their poles, and told us that those poles would not be available for any more cross-street banners. And we're waiting on a final date as to when that will go into effect. But we have not been able to determine any alternate poles that will be a new location.
The other item I was,
The poles that we use for just banners and are not cross-street banners, those typically are ours, and those are still available.
You mean like the decorative
Yeah,
The
the
street-
decorative-
the
lights that
street
have
light
the
poles.
small?
Yeah,
So that's another option.
yeah, but the cross-street banner
Okay.
on.
I mean, those would be great too. I mean, you could see them. I mean, they're clear. I mean, they're
Yeah.
decent size.
They're kind of aligned with our signs already, right? We could probably morph those signs into something.
I guess our next step would be to find out how much you get approved in your budget. You know, last time you had $5,000 available to you.
Yeah, we didn't put a line item for that, did we? We haven't proposed anything for that, Bob, at this point in time.
Then we wouldn't be able to do anything.
In theory, but
Okay.
did we budget specifically for the stickers?
We used just.
We were also going to form a subcommittee to look at the TAC bylaws. Remember the problem we ran into with me being elected as the chair again, but then I was at the end of my term, and we were going to try to revise the bylaws to overcome that problem.
Correct.
Do I have any volunteers that would like to work on a bylaws subcommittee?
Sure, I'll be part of a committee.
Okay, Gary is number one. I'll be part of it pro tem.
Jonathan?
Jonathan? Okay. Anybody else?
I would serve if John Anderson would serve.
Well, you have enough on there. You have enough people on there.
I love it.
What was that, John?
It says you have enough volunteers already, so.
What a guy. You could give up one tennis game. Match. Okay. So it'll be the three of us, Jonathan Sedemir and I will get together. I'll contact both of you. We'll have some, do we have to have public meetings for that?
No. You're not a quorum.
So you're not get above quorum.
Yeah, okay, good. So we'll get together.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody have anything for future agenda items they'd like to address? Okay, then I'm going to adjourn this meeting.